Hello, Brian Hogg here, and this is titled Using Actions and Filters in WordPress, Making a Plugin Your Own. Oftentimes when building a site, you install a plugin that almost does what you want it to do, but with some tweaks, it would do exactly what you want it to do. You never want to edit the plugin directly, as any changes you make would be lost the next time there's an update for that plugin. Fortunately, good plugin authors provide ways to allow someone to modify the plugin functionality without editing any part of the plugin itself, using what's called actions and filters. An action is something that is fired at a specific point in time. It basically tells the WordPress world, hey, something's happening right now. A filter allows you to modify some data or value the plugin is going to use. You can either change part of the value or replace it completely before the plugin actually uses it. Actions and filters are very similar in their usage. For an action, a plugin author would call doAction with a unique identifier and optionally some extra arguments related to the action. In our code, we would then create a call to add action, which would call a function we create when this action is fired. The first argument is the same unique identifier used in doAction and the name of the function we want WordPress to call that we create. Optionally, we can specify the priority of our function being called relative to others who are hooking into the same action, and the number of arguments we want to pass into our function from the original doAction call. As an example, if we have doAction and the identifier being the plugin action, we can create a function called handle the plugin action that echoes out a string, the action is happening now. And to make this string be echoed at the same time that this action is fired, we call add action with the first parameter, the plugin action, the identifier from doAction, and handle the plugin action, which is the name of our function. Filters work by the plugin calling apply filters with a unique identifier and the default value or data the plugin wants to use. Optionally, extra information can be passed in to help us decide how to change the value, such as the post ID. In our code, we call add filter with the same unique identifier, the name of the function, and again optionally the priority relative to other people using this filter, and the argument count of extra information that apply filters is passing through. As an example, if we have apply filters being called with the identifier plugin title and the value title, we can create a function called change plugin title that takes in this title and just overrides it completely, returning new title. So instead of the original plugin outputting a title, it'll return new title. We hook into this by using add filter with the unique identifier plugin title and our name of our function, change plugin title. We can also do something like this, where we take the original value that is being passed in and simply modify it, in this case by adding new and a space at the beginning of the original title. To see if the plugin that we want to modify provides any way for us to modify it, we need to do a search within all the plugin files for calls to doAction or apply filters. If we take an example of the events calendar plugin and do a search for doAction, we end up with 190 occurrences. So that's 190 actions that we can hook into. If we do a search for apply filters, we get 442 occurrences. That's a lot of filters that we can hook into. So with all these results in just one plugin that we took as an example, how do we find the one that we need? You can look at the plugin documentation, if any. A lot of plugins don't come with any. You can look at the code itself. Depending on how well organized it is, you might be able to find what you need just by looking at the structure and the code itself. We can also look at the HTML output and backtrack from there to find the location in the code which might have an action or filter that we can use to modify what we need. Let's look at an example of this. So on my site, I have two plugins currently. I have the events calendar, which is a plugin that displays an events calendar on your website. And I've also created this events calendar updates plugin, which is just where I'm going to put any actions or filters that I want to use to modify the events calendar. So if we look at an individual event, we can see we have the venue and the address and a map. And the client would like underneath the address a little disclaimer saying that the location is subject to change. How can I find out what action or filter we could use to do this? One technique is to look at the HTML output and see where that is in the plugin and see if there's something we can use from there. So if we right-click and go to Inspect Element, we see we have this tribe event meta group venue, which seems like a pretty unique identifier. So if I copy this, and if I search within the plugin files, I see this one instance which doesn't really look like HTML that I'm looking for. And then I also see this other venue.php, which looks pretty much exactly what I was looking at before. And if I open that file, sure enough, it looks like the div that I saw in the HTML on the page is there at the top. And if I scroll down to where I want my disclaimer to appear, I do see an action that I could use. Just to test to see if this is the right location, I can put this disclaimer in, save the file, go back to my site, refresh, and sure enough, I get my disclaimer appearing below the address. So we think, great, we're done. Problem being is we've edited the plugin itself, and if there's ever an update to that plugin, our changes will be lost. So instead, let's use this action that the plugin has provided for us to put this disclaimer in instead. So to use this action, I'm going to put my add action call, which we saw before, inside this functional plugin that I've created. All my function is doing is echoing out the same HTML with the location disclaimer that we had before. And then I use the add action function with, if you remember before, the first parameter is the name of the action that I want to hook into. And the second parameter is the name of the function that will be called when that action is fired. So if I save this code, go back to my site, refresh, and sure enough, the location disclaimer still appears in the same spot. But now when the events calendar plugin is updating the feature, our disclaimer won't disappear because we didn't modify the original plugin itself, we utilized an action. So what if, after looking for documentation, looking at the code, and using the search for HTML technique, you still can't find the filter or action you can use? You can nicely ask the developer, either directly if they provide a website for contact information, or through the support form on the WordPress.org plugin page for what you're looking for. They may add it in for you if it doesn't exist already, or let you know where to find what you're looking for. Try to be succinct and specific in your request, and remember that often plugins are maintained for free, so you might not hear back from them anytime soon, if ever. They may have a paid support or pro option, which you can find by reading their plugin description or searching the web. Also, if possible, you can try to submit a patch or modification of the original plugin, adding in the action or filter you want to be able to use. It's up to the author of the plugin to include your patch or not and release it for everyone to use. Now that you know how you can use actions and filters to modify plugins, go out and make the plugins your own.